What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be diving into some of the new previews we got today alongside the presentation Magic the Gathering did for announcing Dominaria United and giving us the first glimpse of some of the story and also the spoilers for the upcoming set. A lot of the cards in this discussion they had was quite exciting. I'll actually leave a link for it. I think there's a YouTube video that if you want to actually check out the presentation, as it does do a little bit of some other stuff that is going to be happening in the world of MTG for the most part outside of Dominaria United. But there's also a bunch of like feedback and discussion they had on some of the cards that go alongside each preview. So in today's video, we're going to be diving into those previews that they did announce here on their channel. It's definitely quite exciting. Some of the cards do seem quite impressive, and we did get a sneak peek of what the new land cycle seems to be in Dominaria United, possibly even Brothers War, in with the possibility of adding in some additional land types that may help out some of those decks that may need the more aggressive lands. So with that out of the way, let's just dive into the previews and let's start talking about it. So the first card up that we have here is Archangel of Wrath. It's a 4-mana 3/4 with kicker that you can either play black and or red. It is an angel creature, so it looks like we are going to be getting some angels coming with Dominaria United, which is definitely exciting because, it was one of those things when they printed Gata, it didn't seem like it made a lot of sense as a lot of the angels that would have been played in the angel deck were leaving the format. But it does seem like, thankfully, that they are going to put some focus into angels so that the card is somewhat playable for the most part, which is definitely pretty cool. And the fact that this is kind of like you can play a kicker of black and or a kicker of red, which is definitely awesome. You get a 3/4 out of it. And then the benefit of it is that whenever Angel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to any target. Itself also has flying and lifelink, so it's going to do 2 damage to a target. You're going to gain 2 life. If you kick it a second time, it's going to do... it deals 2 damage to any target as well, which is definitely awesome. So essentially, you could possibly pay a 6 mana for a 3/4 flying lifelinker that can do up to 4 points of damage. And it definitely makes it seem like there may be some other color scheme that may be popping up for angels, and definitely having a card that you can pay that additional kicker will make it a much more effective, like creature/spell in effect. So it's like a lightning helix built into an angel, which is definitely pretty awesome. So definitely a card I'm kind of excited to play around with. Maybe taking an idea of diving into some angels with some of these new angels and some of the angels that we will still have left over from the previous set of cards that will be left over after rotation. Then after that, we got the Guardian, a new Banalia. It's a 2-mana 2/2 creature, which is definitely pretty good. This possibly is a card that could fill that 2-drop slot that white decks will be lacking, or decks in general will be lacking with the rotation of Luminarch Aspirant. It has a new mechanic on it, which is called Enlist. As this creature attacks, you may tap up a non-attacking creature we control without summoning sickness, and when we do, you add its power to this creature until end of turn. So what this will do is essentially, let's just say you have a mana creature or some other creature you just don't really want to attack in with, but you maybe want to get that additional points of damage. You can tap that creature in addition to Guardian New Vanilla. It will gain that much power. So if it was a 2-power creature, New Vanilla will go up to a 4/2, which is definitely pretty exciting. On top of that, when it enlists, you get to scry 2, which is definitely good. So giving you a little bit of being able, if you're going to be attacking it aggressively with this card, you're going to be able to fix the top cards of your library. So if you feel like you're kind of drawing a bunch of lands, you can dig through the top 2 cards of your library, fix the top cards, get cards that you possibly will need, which is definitely pretty awesome. And then on top of that, you can also discard a card and give it indestructible end of turn and tap it. So if you're already attacking in with it and you have it tapped, you don't have to tap it again. It's going to stay tapped, and you give it indestructible at the cost of discarding a card, which is definitely going to be pretty sweet as well. I do think this is going to be that new 2-drop card you're going to see a lot of play, just because it is a good card that can be very aggressive. And like I said, the enlist ability is definitely awesome as well, as you can kind of limit on what creatures you really want to attack in, for the most part, but still get those points of damage even if you don't attack with a particular creature, which is definitely pretty sweet. And on top of that, if you get to Scry 2, that's also pretty awesome, just because Scrying 2 is definitely a good ability to have in an aggro deck when you're looking to keep that pressure on against your opponent. After that, we kind of have another card, just an uncommon, nothing super crazy, but it's a 2-mana 1/1 flash creature that when it enters the battlefield, we create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So nothing that's super impressive, but definitely something that is interesting in that regard, that you get to flash this in, get 2 blockers essentially with only paying 2 mana, which is definitely not bad. You know, I don't know if there's going to be a deck that's going to focus on playing like tokens or getting humans out on the battlefield. Maybe humans is still a thing. Maybe there's like human tokens or token, some sort of token deck that you can play. Maybe combine this with like a Gallagrators, which is definitely pretty sweet. You know, it's definitely gonna be kind of interesting where this card falls. It's definitely a card you'll see a lot of play in limited, just because I think a 2-mana 1/1 that produces 2 creatures is still pretty good. And on top of that, it has flash, which makes it definitely good as well. Definitely a pretty cool card. Nothing super exciting, but definitely a card to maybe experiment with if you're trying to maybe figure out a token style deck that you can definitely play. After that, we have another creature here, another angel. It's a 5-mana 3/4 angel that has kicker of a white and a green. Or colorless and a green, I should say. It's a flyer. That's a 3/4. And if it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so it's a possibility of coming into the battlefield as a 5/6. So for 7 mana, you can get a possibility of 5/6. Nothing that's super exciting here, but, you know, it's definitely a card you'll see play unlimited. You know, it's a 3/4 angel, has flying, so it has that evasiveness. And then in late game, limited, you could definitely kick this creature and then make it a 5/6 flyer, which is definitely, you know, it's not bad, but I don't think this will really see play in constructed standard, but still not a bad card regardless. So another thing that they talked about, and this is kind of going with the whole Phyrexian theme of Dominaria United, is that there's sleeper agents, I guess, in Dominaria that are Phyrexian, but they, you know, they appear as another creature. So as you see here, you have a Phyrexian human soldier, so it's technically a human soldier, but secretly its other alter identity is that it's a Phyrexian. This is a 2-mana 3/1 that has kicker of a black. When it enters the battlefield, you get, if it was kicked, each player sacrifices a creature. So definitely an interesting card as well. So for you know, Orzhov colors, you can cast a creature, pay this kicker cost, and then each opponent's now going to have to sacrifice a creature. So if you have multiple creatures that you're willing to sacrifice, this is definitely a card. You know, if maybe you play the last card with the token, maybe you sacrifice a token, and then your opponent has to sacrifice like an actual good creature. This is definitely not bad. Yet again, for a common, I think this is definitely a play you make in limited. It's definitely a card you'll play in limited, but well, yet again, it's a 2-mana 3/1, which is not bad, but I don't know. It's definitely something to maybe experiment with as well if it's playable in some sort of deck, but still not a bad common overall regardless. So the next card up is going to be Sphinx of the Clear Skies, and this is also where they bring back a returning mechanic, and that's going to be Domain. This is a 5-mana creature. That's a 5/5. It also is flying and has Ward 2, which is definitely not bad. You know, your opponent has to pay additional 2 to actually target it, or the spell gets countered, or ability gets countered. And its Domain ability is that whenever it deals damage to a player or combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards of your library. X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. You put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So as much as it is a double blue card, this is definitely one of those cards that there is going to be some sort of decision making. Like it's like a creature that's kind of like a built-in fact or fiction, which is a card where you kind of look for, you kind of draw cards and put them into 2 piles, and your opponent has to make a decision of what cards, you know, your opponent's going to put them into 2 piles, and you make the decision of which one gets into your hand, the other one goes to the graveyard. It's definitely an interesting card. It's definitely a card I could see maybe play if you're trying to play like an Esper deck or something like that. I don't know if 5 color is really going to still be a thing in post-rotation standard, but definitely a card that you're going to try to play a bunch of different land types. At least 3 colors, I would say, is the best here. If you can get one of your Triomes out, that will count for 3 of the colors. So definitely an interesting card nonetheless. It's still a 5-mana 5/5 flyer that, even if you only control blue mana, you at least get to get a card. So definitely not bad, and the fact that you'll still get that card regardless, definitely pretty sweet. So in all, it's not a bad 5-mana 5/5. So this is one of the other cards they kind of focus on for a minute. This is actually a pretty awesome card. It's a 5-mana 4/3 flyer. As additional cost to cast blue permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. So it gives like your blue spells Phyrexian cost to them, and those spells cost blue less to cast if you paid life this way. So you can subtract blue mana off of their casting cost. So like for example, this card is a 3 double blue. If we already had one out, you could pay 4 life and just make it cost 3 colorless mana, which is definitely not bad, though it is at the cost of life. So if you're against a very aggressive opponent, it's definitely maybe not the best thing to do. But whenever we cast a blue permanent spell, we get to draw a card. So whenever we cast, you know, another blue creature and a blue enchantment, any of those things, we'll get to draw a card, which is definitely pretty awesome. So it's definitely a card that gives some sort of tempo. And all in all, for 5 mana, you get a 4/3 that gives, you know, ways for you to kind of be a little bit more aggressive casting wise. Is definitely pretty sweet regardless, for only being a rare. After that, we get another card that actually has a new mechanic as well. This is called Read Ahead. You get to choose a chapter and start with that for that many lower counters on it. And after you draw a step, skip chapters don't trigger sacrifice after chapter 3. So pretty much what this card does is it starts with 2 abilities here. The 2 first chapters are another non-land permanent phases out. It can't phase in as long as this is on the battlefield. And then the last chapter, it destroys all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. So it's definitely an interesting card to see blue play some sort of Wrath of God effect. The one downside is if your opponent has a very wide board. The chapter 3 is not the greatest here, but it's definitely going to be kind of interesting to kind of see what cards maybe you want to phase out for 2 turns against your opponent if you're a more aggressive deck that plays blue, that plays this card. It's definitely one of those things that, you can, get rid of their 2 best creatures so you can still attack it aggressively. And then on top of that, if you wipe the board out, you still get some black creatures in return. Definitely an interesting card. Definitely going to be interesting to see how this read ahead effect really will work. As this is not the only card. There are other cards in other colors that will have this read ahead effect. But definitely a cool thing because there's always that time where you play a saga that you're just kind of like, I kind of want to get to the this particular chapter, but I have to unfortunately wait these many turns. Definitely an interesting mechanic, and we'll definitely see how well these cards kind of do. Are people just skipping to chapter 3 to get usually the best effect, or are people still playing their sagas on chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 like how they normally would? So definitely an interesting card. Regardless of, just kind of seeing how a Wrath effect could work in a blue deck. Next card up we have is Micromancer. It is a 4-mana 3/3 human wizard that when it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for an instant or sorcery spell with mana value 1. We get to reveal it and put it in our hand in a shuffle. So a card that, is okay. It's not great. There aren't, other than like a couple cards that you really can search for 1 mana that are super effective, especially at turn 4. I think this is one of those cards that probably falls maybe into a more limited play. Maybe there's some, 1 mana removal, 1 mana counter spells, or 1 mana bounce effects that you can always search for. But outside of that, I unless there's some really like crazy card that, you can get for 1 mana or less, or for 1 mana, I should say, I don't really see a place for Micromancer, but definitely something that, is still unique. It probably will be played in some sort of combo deck that can look for a particular 1 mana card in other formats. But in a standard format, this doesn't really look like a card that's going to get some Bangbuster card for only 1 mana from your library. So the next card up, we have Impede Momentum. It's a 2-mana sorcery. We get to tap target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. If a permanent with a stun counter would become untapped, remove one of it instead. So what this does is it kind of locks down a creature for up to 3 turns. And then on top of that, you get to scry as well. It is a sorcery speed kind of like, stall kind of card, which is not bad. This is definitely a card that we'll see play in limited just because tapping a thing down for 3 turns could definitely, sway, the momentum of the game in your favor. I don't know if a 2-mana kind of sorcery spell that does this in a more constructed format is going to see a bunch of play, but still something regardless that could be played in like a control deck where you maybe want to slow down the game, where there aren't too many ways to really, wipe the board outside of that maybe saga. Slowing down your opponent's aggressive creatures with this spell is definitely be an okay ability. But yet again, it's definitely one of those things that won't see a play in a bunch of decks overall. So this is the one that I think everyone kind of already knows about if you've been in MTG Arena since the announcement or since this morning once the realms really reset. This is a reprint of a Planeswalker, Liliana of the Veil. I think this one printed all the way back. I can't remember the set. Maybe back in the original. I don't know. I think it's probably been at least 8 or 9 years since this card's been a real card in Standard. But it's a 3-mana Planeswalker Liliana that has some pretty decent abilities, but I don't know if it's going to be an overall powerful card, as I do think there's some other cards that do a lot more things, but definitely still a pretty sweet card regardless. It has a +1 ability that each player discards a card, so definitely, attacking your opponent's hand very early by putting a +1 loyalty counter on it. -2, target player sacrifices a creature, so you can immediately make your opponent sacrifice a creature, but if they have multiple creatures, not super effective. And then the -6 is probably interesting here. It's the overall most interesting thing just because it is kind of one of those things that you separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in that pile of their choice. So it's one of those things like you could make your opponent put all their lands in one pile and then all their other things in another pile. kind of thing. It's definitely going to be kind of interesting to kind of see how this mechanic will work in Arena, especially if you get this to go off in a late game state when there's a lot of things on the battlefield. Are you just sitting there dragging piles onto one side and the other side? But still, all in all, it's definitely a sweet Planeswalker. I believe this Planeswalker still, I think, even from the original print, still holds pretty decent value. It's definitely be pretty sweet that we get a reprint of it in that regard. And having a 3-mana Planeswalker that is still pretty effective at, attacking your opponent's hand and or their creatures on the battlefield is definitely not that bad. And I do think people will play it because it's Liliana and it's only 3 mana to cast, so definitely a pretty sweet Planeswalker overall that I could see play quite a bit in current standard. So next card up is another Phyrexia card. This one's a legendary creature. It's a 4/5 for 4 mana, which is already pretty awesome. It has Death Touch, which is pretty sweet as well. And then whenever we draw a card, we get to gain 2 life. And whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So definitely a card that feels like maybe you could take advantage of gaining a bunch of life whenever you actually draw a card. So if you look for cards that will draw additional cards or just ways to draw those additional cards, which are pretty sweet. This first effect had to negate an effect where you pay life to draw 2 cards or something like that. So definitely not that bad all in all. After that, making your opponent draw cards is definitely awesome as well. Every time forcing them to draw additional cards when they really don't want to is definitely awesome. You could Scorpion your opponent, making them pay 2 life, and then they draw 2 cards and they actually lose 6 life in total is definitely awesome as well. It's definitely a card for 4 mana. You get a pretty decently powerful card. It's not like anything super powerful, but Death Touch is definitely an annoying card effect to deal with. But all in all, She-Holdered the Apocalypse is definitely going to be a sweet card that we'll see some play. I would say also maybe in an aggressive mono black aggro kind of deck. This is definitely a card that feels very mono black aggro in that regard, because you're attacking your life opponents their life points very early and very aggressively, and this is going to be a card to help kind of tax them over and over unless they get rid of it. So definitely a card that I think we'll see play in one way or the other. So the next card up is going to be Braids. This is another card that I think was spoiled early because they had the packs that they announced, and I think Braids was on one of the pack arts in general. And this is definitely a card that's seen variations of it over the years in MTG. It's kind of an iconic card. If you haven't seen Braids is definitely a cool card. This one is a 3-mana 3/3 legendary nightmare creature, and at the beginning of your end step you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, and or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you get to draw a card. It's definitely an interesting kind of card for the most part, as you do have to kind of make them, you have to pay in order to make them pay. It's definitely something I don't know if we'll see a ton of play, just because unless there was a way to pump out tokens or something to kind of negate the effect of sacrificing your permanents in order to make them sacrifice or lose 2 life and draw a card, it's definitely going to be hard to keep up for the most part, but definitely still a pretty sweet card in general if you're someone who's been playing Magic the Gathering for a while. Braids is definitely pretty sweet of a card to play overall. So definitely pretty sweet for them to have a card that is getting reprinted that is pretty iconic, I would say, in one way or the other in MTG. So the next card up here is going to be the Raven Man. This is a 2-mana 2/1. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, create a 1/1 black bird creature token with flying, and this creature can't block. So it creates bird tokens every time something gets discarded, so it negates blood tokens. So if your opponent plays blood tokens, they're going to sacrifice by discarding a card. You're going to get a bird out of it. For 4 mana, we can make each opponent discard a card, and we can only activate that as a sorcery, so we can force a discard in the later games, especially maybe in a more aggressive, maybe in a more control style deck. You can force the issue by making them discard. It is a 2/1, so it is definitely susceptible to a Meat Hook Massacre, especially if you get a bunch of birds out. Your opponent may try to Meat Hook Massacre if they're playing those colors. It's still definitely an interesting card. It's definitely going to see if it will find play in the next meta overall. Is it still playable? With only having 1 toughness, are the birds really effective? How much are people discarded in general, just without actually forcing them to discard is definitely another thing. So yet again, another overall interesting kind of card that I think is, it's interesting to maybe mess around with, but yet again, I don't know if it'll make play. This will definitely be a card I could see play in maybe older formats or formats like Historic or Explorer, where there's some other cards that you can really, make your opponent discard cards and maybe get aggressive that way. But in Standard currently, I'm not really sure if there's going to be a bunch of ways to make your opponent discard cards that are going to be effective and make them really pay for discarding cards. After that, we got Radha's Firebrand. It's a 2-mana 3/1 that whenever it attacks, target creature defendant player controls with power less than Radha Firebrand's power can't block. Which is definitely awesome. Get an aggressive 3/1 that makes creatures that are smaller than it not be able to block it is definitely pretty sweet, so they can't just throw a 1/1 chump blocker in front of it. And then it also has Domain for 6. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. Activate only once each turn. So what this is, yet again setting up is maybe some sort of 3-color deck. I don't know if a 4 or 5-color deck is going to exist, but this is definitely a card that if you get it in a, maybe in like a Naya aggro, or maybe like, I don't know, like a Jeskai aggro. I don't really know what colors, maybe 3 colors people would play that have red in it, maybe even Mardu aggro. This card, this secondary domain ability costs up to, 3 mana, which is definitely not that bad to give it an additional +2/+2, which turns it from a 3/1 into a 5/3. Yet again, a pretty sweet card. I would say this is going to be in some sort of aggro-aggressive strategy that maybe also plays, a couple other colors. Because outside of that, for it being domain of 6, if you're only playing 1 color, this would still cost 5 mana, which is not great for only +2/+2. So it's definitely one of those things that you'll see players who play this play multiple colors, and definitely something I'll probably try out to see if like Naya aggro is really a thing, or if it's any good in the next Standard. After that, we get another interesting card here, another iconic, person in the lore of Magic, and that card is Squead, Dubious Monarch. It's a 3-mana 2/2 Goblin Noble legendary creature that has haste, and then whenever it attacks, create a 1/1 red Goblin creature token that is tapped and also attacking. So it's a 3-mana 2/2 that is going to essentially attack it for 3 if you attack in with it immediately, and then you can actually cast Squead from your graveyard by paying 4 mana and exile 4 other cards from a graveyard rather than paying its mana cost. So if you've been playing MTG since Ikoria or before, this has the ability of Escape built into the card without really being called Escape, which is definitely not that bad. It's definitely, if you're someone who's being aggressive and trying to attack game for a lot of pressure, it's definitely a good card. The one downside is, you have to tap it. It is susceptible to like Wandering Emperor. But the one benefit there is you still get the 1/1 red Goblin creature token that is also out on the battlefield. So definitely not a bad card. It's definitely going to be interesting if people will play this card, because it's okay. It's not great, but it's still not a bad card, for being 3 mana and having haste and, creating a token when it does attack. Another card, because this is the big question I think I've been asking myself since, we were kind of waiting out rotation, kind of get an idea of what cards will be getting removed. It looks like we're going to be getting Lightning Strike back in the format, and it will be illegal in Standard, which is a 2-mana 3 damage to any target. This is definitely pretty sweet because we lose cards like Royal Eruption, which is like really the only other 2 mana deals damage to any target kind of spell that deals 3 damage, though that one had kicker, so you do possibly more damage. But still having an instant speed spell that deals 2 damage and it deals it to any target is pretty sweet. 3 damage is definitely good. Combine this with like Play with Fire. This is definitely gonna be a good card to have in those kind of like is it style decks or is it burn decks, or maybe even a good replacement if you are someone who plays Burrows aggro. This is definitely gonna be a good replacement for that Royal Eruption, because not only are you kind of replacing Royal Eruption, which is a sorcery spell, this one is instant, which is definitely actually I think an upgrade, even if the other one has kicker that you can technically do 5 damage if you pay the kicker cost. I think a 2 mana dealing 3 damage at instant speed is definitely a much better card overall, especially in an aggressive deck. So the next card up is going to be the Ward spell. This is another one of those sagas that has the read ahead ability, so you can skip the chapters. This one does cost 7 mana, which is definitely quite expensive, but it definitely is a pretty sweet, spell in general. You get to look at the top 7 cards of your library for the first 2 chapters. You may reveal a non-saga permanent card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then on Chapter 3, you get to put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So it's kind of one of those cards like you're trying to maybe play a Titan of Industry or find a Titan of Industry or something like that, or maybe find multiple Titan of Industries, or find a Planeswalker or some other crazy big thing. This is definitely like the big payoff card. This is going to help you dig through your library. Maybe your board got wiped and you need replacement cards. This is kind of like that, spell in like a green deck that you're just trying to find the next big thing. If you already have those those cards in your hand. For 7 mana, you can possibly cast like 2 Titan of Ministries instantaneously. You cast a Planeswalker and a big creature. You can cast 2 creatures in general. Overall, pretty sweet card. The Speedhead ability, like I said, is going to be definitely kind of interesting to see how people will play with it. Do people, just skip to like chapter 2 and do chapter 2 and chapter 3? Do some people just skip to chapter 3 immediately? Or are there still people that will play the sagas and just kind of go through the process and slowly build up what they're looking for when it comes to cards like this? So the next card up is called Herd Migration. This is a 7 mana sorcery that has domain. You create a 3/3 green beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control, which is definitely awesome. And then for 2 mana, you get to discard it from your hand. You get to search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. You gain 3 life. So all in all, this is, not bad. It's definitely one of those things. For 2 mana, you can kind of, fix your mana. It's kind of like, whatchamacallit, the lesson. So all in all, this is kind of like Environmental Sciences built into a sorcery. Definitely pretty sweet. This is definitely a card that could kind of fill that role if you're someone who likes to play Environmental Sciences. It's definitely a good card to have for maybe a deck that is trying to play multiple colors. As the domain ability is definitely pretty sweet as well. So if you cast it for 7, you probably want to make it at least create 3 tokens, if not more, because casting it for 7 and only getting 1 beast creature token out of it doesn't seem that great. But all in all, I think it's definitely not a bad card to have as well if you're just looking for ways to fix your mana, if you are trying to pull off some multicolored, abilities with its discard effect. So I think all in all, it's a pretty decent card, even if you're only discarding it to find those basic lands. So the next card here we have is Territorial Morrow. It's a 5 mana XX. Its power and toughness are equal to twice the number of basic land types among lands you control. It's a pretty interesting card, right? I yet again, I don't know if people are going to play in 5 colors, but it's definitely one of those things. If you're playing 3 colors for 5 mana, you can at least get maybe like a 6/6 out of it. Maybe you have that one additional land of the other colors you're not really playing. There is also the Scarecrow from, I think, Crimson Vow or Innistrad or Midnight Hunt, one of the sets that helps you look for those lands from your graveyard or from your library, which is definitely pretty sweet. I would say if anything, this is probably more of a limited card, just because yet again a 5 mana vanilla 6/6 is also not really super impressive. You kind of want some sort of crazy ability for 6 mana or for 5 mana, and even a 6/6 that does nothing outside of just having that power and toughness is okay at best. It's not really that great or explosive. So the next card up is Ajani Sleeper Agent. So Ajani is secretly a Phyrexia, which is definitely pretty sweet. It is kind of one of those things that for 4 mana you can play it for its normal cost. It has this ability called Completed. So if you pay the Phyrexia mana by paying 2 life or paying the white or the thing, it enters the battlefield. It enters in with 2 fewer loyalty, so it doesn't enter with 4. It enters with 2 loyalty, which is definitely kind of an interesting ability overall. Top one is you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card or planeswalker card, you put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put that on the bottom of your library. So definitely kind of like, let me look at the top card of my library. Is it a creature or planeswalker? Okay, it is. I'm going to reveal it, put it in my hand. Worst case scenario, you get rid of a land that you maybe not need and put it on the bottom. -3, you can distribute 3 +1/+1 counters on among up to 3 target creatures. They gain vigilance at the end of turn, so giving creatures vigilance for -3 is definitely pretty sweet. Even if you play this on turn 4, you can immediately tack in and kind of be aggressive. And then -6, you get an emblem. Whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker spell, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. So Ajani has a built-in poison mechanic, which is definitely awesome as well. Though I do see this being one of those things that probably, you could cheat it out, a turn earlier if you pay life. But I do think this is going to be one of those planeswalkers you want to play for its full cost, just because getting to that -6 may be a little bit rough. And then on top of that, you really, the +1 by itself and not being able to do anything else is really not really super crazy that you would want to maybe do on turn 3. It's a pretty okay ability, but it's not a great ability. But I guess if you're kind of lacking creatures, maybe this kind of fills that role. But nonetheless, it's definitely kind of cool to see the emblem kind of give like this poison effect, because with with kind of the poison leaving with what's his name from the format. It is definitely kind of cool that they're still kind of keeping poison around, and you know, having it with the Johnny is definitely pretty sweet, and it's definitely kind of interesting to see if we get any other cards that will also add you know, the poison in general. So definitely pretty sweet there. So the next card up is we have Soul Wind Grace. It's a 4 mana 5/4 that whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped and under our control. For a green mana, you can discard a land card, you gain 3 life. For 2 mana, discard a land card, you can draw a card, and for 3 mana, discard a land, you can give it indestructible until end of turn and tap it. So what this is going to do is essentially you can keep on cycling that same land card over and over again. It's definitely going to be kind of interesting here, or if you play like fetch lands or something like that, you can play the fetches that, you know, they instantly sacrifice and go look for your library for a particular card. And then it kind of, you know, those additional lands, once this is out on the battlefield, if you don't really need additional mana, you can start sacrificing them and put them to the graveyard, or discarding them to put them in the graveyard and get whatever effect you may need, whether it's life, whether it's, you know, you want to draw a card, or whether or not you want to just give it indestructible so it doesn't die, maybe some sort of spot removal or things like that. But definitely pretty sweet, and definitely awesome that they're supporting the 3 colors that, you know, we got with Streets of New Capenna. So definitely some pretty awesome cards to add in with that overall. Next card up is we have Zur Eternal Smear. It's a 3 mana Esper color legendary creature human wizard that has flying, and then whenever enchantments we control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, which is definitely pretty awesome. So looking at like maybe some sort of Esper enchantment style deck, you know, having them have Hexproof is definitely awesome as well. This itself is not an enchantment creature, so it doesn't get Hexproof, but give your other things that are enchantment creatures, Hexproof is definitely awesome, so they can't be spot removal, though they can still be meat hook. For 2 mana, you can give target non-aura enchantment you control. It becomes a creature in addition to its other types. It has basic power and toughness equal to its mana value. So its other ability is like you can turn on an enchantment that you have on the battlefield. So if you play like, you know, enchantments that maybe, you know, remove creatures from the battlefield, like, I don't know, so if you play like an enchantment deck like Mashago's Reign of Truth, if you're playing it in this deck, maybe they killed your creature, and, you know, it goes to the next upkeep where you have to put the +1/+1 for each enchantment you control on it. You can actually activate it, put it on Mashago's Reign of Truth, and give itself the +1/+1 based on how many enchantments or auras you control, which is definitely pretty cool. It's a 1/4. It's not anything super crazy, but the idea of it giving all the creatures you control that are enchantments, the Death Touch, the Lifelink, and the Hexproof is definitely pretty sweet. This is a static ability across the board. So it's definitely be kind of interesting to see what kind of Esper colored decks are going to pop up that are playing enchantments, and Zur is definitely one of those cards that will make those decks play much better. Next card up is we have the 5 mana Sil Canard the Tainted. It's a 5 mana 5/5. At the beginning of your end step, you get to choose one that hasn't been chosen. The first one is draw a card, which is definitely pretty awesome. The next one is if each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. The third one is it deals 3 damage to up to 1 target creature and or planeswalker. And the last one is you exile it and then return to the battlefield under an opponent's control. So the one downside here is that eventually your opponent will get this card. But the fact that it has this ability, that maybe there's some sort of way you can sacrifice it or get rid of it off the battlefield, maybe you play it, and I don't know, maybe you Ob Nixilis it away before it gets to the last ability goes off. It's definitely a pretty sweet creature. It's definitely a 5 mana creature that is in Grixis family, which is definitely pretty sweet. Like I said, they're supporting like the 3 colors that popped up with Streets of New Capenna, so definitely pretty awesome to see a card that may be like the top end card of that said deck, and then giving you some sort of way to maybe get some good effects out of it and also being aggressive with it. And on top of that, being able to sacrifice it to like an Ob Nixilis to get the 5 casualty will definitely be pretty sweet overall. So the next card up is going to be Astorbearer of the Blades. It's a 4 mana 4/4 legendary human warrior that whenever it enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of our library, we reveal an equipment card or reveal card among them and put it into our hand, and put the rest on the bottom of our library in any random order. Its static abilities that equipments we control have equip 1, which is definitely pretty awesome, making our equipments cost only 1 to equip. And then it makes all our vehicles have the ability of crew 1. So it's a 4 mana, making things crew for less and or equip for less is definitely pretty sweet. I feel like there'll be people exploring with, like, you know, some sort of maybe enchantment or some sort of equipment deck, or even people playing like vehicles and having this and just being able to crew a particular vehicle for only, you know, 1 is definitely pretty awesome as well. It's definitely one of those things with call time and all that stuff rotating, we lose kind of a lot of the good equipments that are currently in standard, but nonetheless, it's definitely a card you'll see pop up here and there, I think, if anyone's trying to play some sort of direct equipment style deck. The next card up is going to be Joana, the Aegis Inventor. It's a 2-mana 2/3 legendary human artificer that has the ability of tapping it. You get to put 2 ingenuity counters on it, and then you may play an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of ingenuity counters on Joana. So initially, it's you get a free artifact for 2 mana, then you get a free artifact for 4 mana, and so on and so forth, depending on how many times you're able to tap it, to where it gets to the point that you pretty much can cast any artifact no matter what the cost is from your hand onto the battlefield for free, essentially. It's definitely one of those things that, yet again, we're kind of losing some of the cards I think would make it much better in Standard. But that, all in all, it's definitely one of those cards you see probably pop up in Commander or Brawl. It'll definitely be something maybe you'll see in a Historic. Maybe this kind of gives like artifacts a little bit of a way to cheat some artifacts on the battlefield a couple turns earlier when they're all tapped out and they don't really have any additional artifacts to play. But all in all, it seems like a pretty okay card. I would say it's not like a card that right now feels like it has a home currently in Standard, but definitely I feel like maybe over the course, as we get maybe more artifacts, maybe we'll find its own home as we get more stuff from maybe like the Brothers War or something like that. But still, all in all, a cool card that you can tap and get some things on the battlefield for free. And then the last card up is going to be Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. It's a 2-mana 1/3 that whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap up to 2 untapped creatures we control. If we do, we get to draw a card. Not bad. It's definitely one of those things that, early on, you may not have 2 untapped creatures we control that you maybe want to tap down if your opponent's maybe an aggressive deck. And then as well, for 5 mana, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance end of turn. So I guess this is where it kind of sets itself up. It's kind of one of those things where maybe you attack in, give everything vigilance, and then maybe tap them down to draw the card on that additional spell afterwards. But definitely the initial card, I would say, sees more play, maybe unlimited for the most part, but I don't know. I don't really see that ability that you want to tap stuff down unless you have a way to produce additional creatures that you don't mind tapping down in the process. But still not a bad uncommon. That's a cool legendary human wizard. And then the last cards up that I kind of want to announce, and they're all the cards that kind of they're all together and they do the same exact thing, but they do different colors, is that we kind of got the reprints of the Pain lands. Now, these are lands that were from way back in the day that, produce colorless mana, or for Pain 1 life, you can produce 1 of 2 colors. This is definitely kind of interesting here, as they are pretty decent lands. It's definitely one of those things that if, early on you don't mind being aggressive, but if your life points get low, it's kind of one of those things where you have to kind of manage how much damage you are taking. So it's like, if you want to play, a bunch of colors, you're going to take some life points whenever you play a spell. It kind of feels like it kind of goes well with the overall theme of Dominaria United, where it's kind of like there's some Phyrexian mana stuff happening. There's some stuff where you can pay life and do certain things. It's kind of cool to see these Pain lands pop back up. It looks like, as of right now, this is all they've announced, so it looks like we only have the enemy colors, so it's possible that we get the enemy colors right now, and then maybe with the Brothers War, we get the other 5 colors. But still not too bad, as, this is kind of where the skeptical point of, certain decks where it's like, well, I'm losing pathways. What's my replacement for a pathway? Well, at least we have Pain lands for the time being. And, these are definitely pretty cool iconic cards that I've played with in the past. Back in the day, I played like a... I played a Teamer color deck that played Shivian Reef. I played Yamavaya Coast. These are definitely cards I can't wait to replay again, just because, I really enjoyed, playing that deck back in the day. And this kind of brings like those nostalgia kind of vibes for the most part. So overall, pretty cool that we still get some sort of dual land that is still pretty decently effective. It will be kind of interesting to see how many people kill themselves without realizing it by paying too many life points each time they want to produce a color of a particular choice, and how quickly they turn into kind of finding that balance of paying dual lands and also like the slow lands that we currently have in Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt. So definitely kind of like that interesting balance. But all in all, this is kind of what we got, announced so far with Dominaria United. I know over the course of the next few days or so, we'll get even more previews, and then at some point, I think the list that I showed the other day when I did a preview video for Dominaria United will get updated to have all the cards. As we are getting really close to Dominaria's release. I think we are about we're about 2-ish months away, or 2-ish weeks away, as we are at as the recording, we are at the 18th. And Dominaria United releases on the 1st in MTG Arena, which is definitely awesome. So we are legit, as of the recording of this video, 2 weeks away. So I'm definitely excited. I definitely can't wait to see what other cool cards we'll be getting with Dominaria United. Are there any favorites that you may have saw here in today's video that you guys are excited to play or you can't get your hands on? Let me know in the comments below. Are you guys okay with having these weird Pain lands, I think, as our new mana base, if we want to fix our colors of mana by paying life in order to, produce 1 of 2 colors? Let me know that down in the comments below. But if you like the video, hit that like button. Definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, you want to know when I post new videos on the channel like this one, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Just want to give a special shout out to the channel members here on my YouTube channel. You can also become a channel member yourself down below the video, hitting that join button. It definitely helps out a lot, and I just appreciate you guys for your support.